Good morning and welcome to another edition. This is the sixth edition of the ACSIS Exchange webinar series, which takes place every 2 weeks. It's a vital platform for innovators, policymakers, and trailblazers shaping the digital economies of Africa and the Caribbean to engage in forward-thinking, solution-driven dialogue on financial inclusion, digital resilience, and sustainable economic transformation. This session explores one of the fastest evolving and high impact sectors, FinTech and cybersecurity. Twin pillars critical to unlocking inclusive growth, securing digital infrastructure, and enabling trusted cross-border trade. As mobile money, digital wallets, blockchain, AI, and open banking revolutionize financial access, new risks emerge, from cyber attacks to regulatory gaps that threaten and undermine trust and innovation. How can Africa and the Caribbean collaborate to build secure, inoperable, and inclusive digital financial ecosystems that serve both rural, micro enterprises, and global investors? From remittances to credit scoring, identity verification to payment gateways, our regions are experiencing a fintech boom, yet we face persistent challenges, digital divides, talent gaps, regulatory uncertainty, and underinvestment in cyber security architecture. This conversation convenes fintech founders, digital policymakers, ethical hackers, regulators, and impact investors to explore how do we ensure cybersecurity by design in emerging fintech infrastructure? What participants or partnerships and standards are needed for secure and seamless intra-regional digital trade? How can fintech drive sustainable development, MSME financing, and diaspora-led investments? As Africa and the Caribbean navigate a new era of digital acceleration, let us seize this opportunity to shape sovereign digital futures, build resilient tech ecosystems, and position our regions as secure and inclusive fintech powerhouses on the global stage. This is more than a webinar. It's a cultural call to action. Join us. Now I'll introduce the team. I'm David Roberts, entrepreneur, publisher, and event convener, noted for creating the blog caribdirect.com, Caribbean Food and Drink Conference, and the founder of the African Caribbean Sustainability and Investment Summit. We have with us today our producer, Madison Tavares, dedicated to amplifying authentic Caribbean stories. Her storytelling expertise will help elevate ACSIS's global impact and foster greater inclusion in its narratives. We also have our lead researcher, senior campaign manager with 10 years experience delivering global brand campaigns, driving audience engagement, and leading purpose-driven marketing strategies across sectors including finance, jewelry, and regulatory communications. Now, the highlights for today's webinar is the guests. And we have with us our first guest, Oluwasegun Owolabi, a Nigerian cybersecurity engineer at Moniepoint. He shares vital insights on infrastructure security and risk reduction to help founders, developers, and SMEs navigate today's evolving digital threat landscape. And we have from Dominica, DeJean. He's the CEO of Drop. He is revolutionizing Caribbean remittances using broad blockchain and stable coins, driving secure, low-cost access and connecting Africa, Caribbean, and the diaspora economies through inclusive fintech innovation. Now, some housekeeping. Questions are expected to be asked, and we ask that you either put them in the chat or you raise your hand, whichever is more convenient for you. So, with no further ado, I will invite our first speaker, Tanner, who I believe has graced us with his presence. So, Tanner, over to you and welcome to this, the sixth edition of the Axis Exchange webinar.
Yes, guys, good morning. Well, it's morning for me as I am here in the United States. It's very early, but I definitely wanted to make it. So I'm happy
Thank
to
you.
be here with the team. Again, as everything is presented here, my name is Tana. I'm from the island nation of Dominica, and I've been in the fintech space for quite some time. I started with Think, then I went over to Tropic Transfer, and now Drop is really what we're working on, and we think we're gonna make some serious traction and basically bring everyone on board.
Thank you. Thank you. So tell us about what you're actually doing now and how is it impacting Africa and the Caribbean?
So right now, Drop is really a remittance platform, kind of similar to what most persons are used to. Um, for me, what became a pain point was having to send money back home to my family, right? It got very expensive. Even to receive the money, folks would have to take transportation, go to the location. Sometimes you don't even have money to go to that location, but you're going to pick up the money, right? With Drop, where we're different is we're creating a network of vendors. So anyone with a registered business but that is in a local community, especially for the unbanked, which are the people that don't have access to a bank or limited access to financial institution. Drop would allow those vendors to be cash out location for individuals. So let's say my grandmother lives in rural Dominica. I send that money over to her. Instead of going to the capital to receive it, she would just go to any of those local vendors and receive that money. All she has to show would be a code on her phone or a QR code. Any of those would suffice.
Amazing. That is revolutionary. And how are you finding it in terms of take up? Are people gravitating to it quite quickly, or do you have to do some convincing and cajoling?
Of course, with many ventures, especially like mine, you want to do a lot of marketing. So we created several wait lists. We joined multiple Facebook groups, but where we face some challenges is because on the back end, we are using the blockchain. So I'm not sure if you guys have heard, but recently the US government created a law called the Genius Act. And with the Genius Act, what it pretty much did, it basically put a green stamp on stable coins. All right. Now, stable coins is a type of crypto currency that is pegged to an asset. And you can do it with gold, you can do it to a currency. In our case, it's pegged to the US dollar. So we are using USDC. And some persons, obviously, they're not fully on board with the crypto element of this business now. So what we have done is really hide things with the technology on the back end. And all people see at the front end is really the UI or the interface where they're just sending money. But we still have that little taboo that cryptocurrency is pretty much volatile. So a lot of folks have difficulty embracing it. But in our case, though, we've been able to get a few people to be ambassadors or advocates to really say, this is working for me. The transaction is transparent, it is secure, and most relevant is the fact that those persons receive the money instantaneously. And not only that, we have the vendors on the ground that's doing most of the legwork saying, hey, I am making money from this business. Otherwise, I would have to go through so many to become a Western Union or a MoneyGram vendor. With Drop, it's more inclusive.
Amazing. Wow. So I get that what inspired you to start this was the fact that you are aware that people were having challenges receiving money, and even I think your experience was that you too had a similar experience. Um, how can fintech startups foster deeper collaboration between Africa, the Caribbean, and diaspora? to drive inclusive growth?
I think personally, the diaspora is the bridge, right? Fintech startups can create the platform that connect to Africa, but we need entrepreneurs, we need investors, we need mentors, we need customers, right? To also share the tech and the infrastructure. Most importantly, collaboration could look like joint remittance corridors, which is what we have echoed in our conversations with some of our stakeholders. And in terms of the pool of fintech innovation and cross-regional partnership, I think that's where the Africa piece come out. Now, in my experience, even when I started working on Drop, I actually leverage a lot of the best practices from Africa fintech company. Okay. At first, when I was working on Tropic Transfer, we did a pitch event in Dallas, Texas. And that was with Techstars. It was one weekend where we had to create a minimal viable product. And in pitching Tropic Transfer, all of the elements that we look at was how Africa is using SSIDs, how Africa is using crypto, how Africa is using the blockchain to get to people that are in the underserved communities. And that is what create the catalyst for drop. So by that, I think looking at the whole geopolitical landscape right now, um, now is the time for there to be synergies between the Caribbean and Africa. The trade conference that's going on in the Caribbean right now is really giving rise, right, to the opportunities for collaboration. Um, I have always been a strong advocate to collaborating with Africa. I mean, Nigeria right now is a hub for most of the fintech companies that I personally work with and the people that I interact with. And most recently, I've created a lot of friends in Zimbabwe, right, and South Africa. And it's just because of having those conversations, going to tech events. There are people that leave Africa, come to the United States just to go to symposium, just to go to programs that would allow them to share best practices and go back to the region. So I think in terms of collaboration, we can really come together between the Caribbean and Africa and even the diaspora to see how we can actually bring that technology, not to just folks in the other part of the world, but really to the Caribbean and Africa.
That is amazing. It would seem like the opportunities are immense for growth in this area because we have stats that suggest that something in the region of over 80% of Africa, that entire continent, is underbanked. So that creates an enormous opportunity for what you're doing. But do you have similar figures for the Caribbean in terms of how many people are actually without access to a bank account?
Yes, yes. I'm happy that you brought that question up. So in the Caribbean right now, in the entire Caribbean, that's all of the islands, we are looking at 60%. Okay, so 60% of the people are actually unbanked or underbanked.
That is, well, I think you hit a gold mine. But I'm sure you wouldn't admit that on this show. But definitely there are tremendous opportunities for growth. I mean, I grew up in the Caribbean and I had my own experiences. As a matter of fact, up to now, there are still people having problems with accessing finance to mainstream banks, which you would think in 2025 should be a thing of the past. But anyway, I think there's opportunity for you to promote what you're doing throughout Africa and the Caribbean, and I suspect you have the networks. I imagine the competition that exists in Africa might not be a daunting fact because I know there are loads of platforms doing similar. But I'm happy to say that collaboration that you are engaging in is helping you. Is that correct?
Correct, correct. So there is one thing that I always tell myself as a founder, there is no such thing as market saturation, right? I think every business within whatever space, within whatever industry, can actually find a particular niche within that space to cater to. There's always something that someone can do better or different, right? So there is that component. But just to go back to the initial question about barriers, I think for us, the biggest challenge we have had is to get the governments to be on board, right? It's just the way that the financial architecture is laid out in the Caribbean right now, it's so westernized and open to Western entrepreneurship and ideas and stuff that persons born on the island wanting to create startups and really bring people into the fold, um, the policymakers, we went through so many hurdles, paid so many fees just to get boots on the ground. I wish forums like this would really help to sensitize the governments that we at least need relaxed policies. Now, I understand there's a lot of financial fraud and stuff going on. So there is reasons for those barriers. But in this age where technology is really creating the space for people to become closer and more inclusive, we need the governments to be on board to work with like-minded entrepreneurs like ourselves to create an easier way where we can get those businesses up and running.
I think that's an incredible point because very often we hear that the government's not doing enough or the government's not providing incentives to help entrepreneurs to get to the next level. You hear that in very many sectors and industries. But now you've outlined that you've had some challenges yourself with that. Do you think that it's probably designed that way to manage the number of competitors in this market? Granted that, of course, we know it's really subject to a lot of fraud and irregularities. But do you think that the government are deliberately doing that to control the amount of players in that space?
That is very interesting. I think we are at the precipice of cutting edge technology, and I think the biggest piece is the Caribbean have not done a good job in terms of catching up to the technology, right? The archaic banking system, some of the laws that are in place, they have been on the books for a very long time. So what I think is we haven't really spent time to look at, hey, the world is going in that direction. There's blockchain, the cybersecurity piece is unfolding. There are so many boot camps out there now that are teaching classes in cybersecurity, giving certifications and those things. And what we have seen is we as a Caribbean have been very slow to jump onto those things. So I don't see it as they're really trying to keep a tight control on who comes in and out of the ecosystem. I think it's pretty much having an archaic um, infrastructure, financial system that doesn't allow you to plug and play the way that you need to. For example, just for me to connect an API inside of my app to be a off-ramp for persons, there's a lot of fees that have to be paid, and a lot of those APIs and code are connected to more of a Western system setup as opposed to more of an organic Caribbean setup, right? The way that the central bank works and help persons get on board is not the same way that Barbados, with its own central bank, is working, right? So I think there need to be better collaboration in terms of us using different currencies and us having different laws and regulation that govern the way finance occurs in the Caribbean.
I hmm. There is something that's been bugging me for some time about the financial system across the Caribbean. There's a particular country, their banking system, as you mentioned, some of them are quite archaic. Well, this particular country has a very archaic system that is owned and managed by private concerns. These are families that have been in control of the finance system for many, many decades. I've been told as recent as 2 weeks ago that nothing's going to change in that country until these people die. Do you see that as being a major setback for the promotion of what you're doing in a market as large as that? And I don't want to call the name of the place, but it's a huge market in the Caribbean. How do you think we can circumvent systems like that that are controlled by private families?
That is a very interesting question, a really interesting question, because I think the first thing is to educate, right? And I think technology like what I have and what we are offering and the way that we're doing it and sensitizing people is creating awareness in ways that that did not exist before, right? So I think when we take the conversations to the governments of the different countries. I mean, for us, it's a little easier because we are working within the OECS space, right? And by OECS, I mean the Organization for Eastern Caribbean. So we'd start with Dominica, then go to St. Kitts, and so on and so forth. Um, we need to show the governments, hey, those persons that have their hands or fingers deep into your financial system is actually crippling innovation, right? If you want to be part of an emerging country that actually gets to a space where the Caribbean is seen as developed, you need to move away from those mentality where one family or a company or a business controls the way finance happen within your country. Now, granted, a lot of those governments do get kickbacks from having the monopoly with one particular individual or family, right? They have over the years benefited from it. But I think now, as young people, we're seeing that that should not be the case. And that's why I come to to this point of decentralization. That's where the blockchain comes in because no one controls the blockchain, right? And I think that's why it's daunting for most islands as well to embrace it, just because it would do away with what I call even in the time of the aristocracy, where one group or people or company controls everything. We really want to move away from where we were when we were colonized to a point where it's more inclusive and everybody can get a piece of the bread. We don't want people to think that we're coming in to just eat up all of the market share. No, we're coming in with the intention to really create opportunities, build communities, and help folks understand the power of financial independence, which we are lacking. Another important piece, sir, and I want to mention that is financial literacy. We go through school and we're using the Westminster system of education, right? But in the curriculum, there is no mention of financial literacy or personal finance or how to invest, how to create generational wealth. And I think that's also part of the problem that we're facing because with ignorance, right? People just don't know all the opportunities that are out there and that we can embrace.
That's a very good point because one of the things I learned growing up is that when you leave school, you need to be gearing yourself up for a job. Nobody ever spoke about entrepreneurship. As a matter of fact, entrepreneurship was felt that if you're lazy and you don't have the aptitude to pass your subjects, that's where you'd end up. You'd end up being someone selling, a vendor selling on the streets. But now we realize that that is a fallacy. But that brings me to my next question. The whole idea of blockchain has revolutionized, the technological space out there. And I know that several central banks are not in favor of the idea of blockchain because what that does, it essentially disturbs the status quo. We've had fiat currencies for centuries, and people have begun to rely on that. Do you think that these two systems can work side by side, or do you think that fiat might uh, reserve its position as the dominant currency, or do you think that blockchain may at some point overtake and take over that space?
I definitely think blockchain is the future. I think blockchain is definitely going to take over, especially as we get to the Web3 space, right? And by Web3, I mean it's the new internet technology. Right now, we're running on Web2. Once we get to Web3, where everything is actually on the blockchain, it means that anyone that's not prepared for that transition is going to get left behind, okay? The fiat currency system is not a sustainable one. One, it gives rise to a lot of inflation, right? You can just go to your central bank and print money, right? That's that's not the way a financial system should be developed. Now, granted, guys, I don't have any my degrees are not in finance per se, but going to business school, I did some elements of finance, so I understand how that piece works. But what I think is happening, there's a transition, and the US has done a really good job at integrating the blockchain with the fiat system, and you're slowly seeing that transition. Now, when I mentioned the Genius Act, which was signed by President Trump and his Republican friends, like the last couple months, it basically gave rise to the US becoming the crypto capital of the world. What that also did, it showed that stable coins is really the future because it does away with the volatility that is attached to any particular cryptocurrency, and it creates the catalyst for persons to transition to the blockchain. What I will say though is that in the Caribbean, we have so many seminars, workshops that are government funded, government led, even you have NGOs pushing those things. And I think the most difficult piece is when you have certain banks that are controlling everything within an ecosystem, it makes it difficult for there to be any type of conversations about innovation and those things. The other thing is what we have seen is for the banks, it's a little expensive to transition to those because they have to change the entire architecture to accommodate for it. There's government incentives or programs that is helping them to transition, but I think there need to be a deeper collaboration. And I don't think it has to be just within the Caribbean. I think we can leverage expertise in Africa to really get us to where we need to be. And that's why I think the Africa piece is coming. Right now, in terms of pan-Caribbean and pan-African, there's a migration, right? You have Black entrepreneurs leaving the United States getting citizenship in different countries in Africa. So they're going back with that information. So the US is going through what is called a brain drain right now. And the brain drain that's happening is that Black Americans are moving from the US to Africa. So all of those things with the blockchain, cryptocurrency, just educating people about the use of it, it's becoming more ubiquitous. It's becoming more mainstream. And I think the shift over time will happen. I just don't think we're moving fast enough.
Well said. I look, I can chat with you all day on this thing, but I just know we don't have the time. But I have one burning question before I open the floor to further questions. Now, the Caribbean, as you know, has a number of independent currencies, right? I mean, Jamaica has its dollar, Guyana has its dollar, you have the Eastern Caribbean, EC currency, Barbados have their own. Do you think that what you're proposing is going to struggle as a result of these different currencies across the region, or do you think it would actually help? Because everyone has this thing about, oh yeah, my currency is stronger, or my currency has more importance. Do you think that what you're suggesting would help that situation?
That is a very interesting question. I don't even know how one could intelligently answer it, but I'm gonna take a stab at it, right? Um, I think it's going to be quite challenging to convince people that we need to move away from that mentality, right? The second piece is, of course, with the technology that I'm pushing in terms of the blockchain, in terms of what we want to do with stable coins and being on chain, is really at some point we could create a stable coin, right? That is one coin across the Caribbean and Africa that we can actually use on the blockchain. So that would become a currency just tied to everyone. Every island would embrace it, right? Every African nation would embrace it. And what it would do is move away from all intermediaries, right? It would be on the blockchain, which means that it's secure, it's unhackable. And of course, what it would do is actually allow financial independence across the board for all citizens. Okay, you have your wallets, you go to different location, you make a payment, all of that would happen with that currency. The currency could also over time be used to facilitate trade in Europe, in the United States, wherever we see it. So I think transitioning from the fiat system, which we just mentioned, to the blockchain would give rise to something like that because it would do away with the conversation about my currency is stronger or better than yours. And it would help with inter-regional collaboration, which is what we're looking for. The CARICOM and the single market economy has paved the way for that. I just think there need to be action with the discussions so that we can get to a place where we're not looking at individual countries, but we're looking at a united Caribbean and what we can be.
Wow. Well, you've put such an interesting spin on what you're doing in the region that I have to applaud you. It's amazing what you're doing. And I hope you get all the support that you need, not just from the government agencies that you have to encounter in what you're doing, but also private concerns, including chambers of commerce around the region. So thank you so much. That is me, my questions. I'm going to open the floor now to see if anyone has any burning questions.
Ask away, guys.
Come on, don't be shy. Don't be shy. You might not get this opportunity to ask Tana a question again. All right. So Isaac has a question.
Yes, Isaac, go ahead.
All right. Good afternoon, Mr. Tanner.
Hi.
Can you
Nice to
hear
meet you,
me?
Isaac.
Oh,
Yes, we
great.
can hear you loud and clear.
All right. So that was a very wonderful presentation, wonderful conversation, very insightful one I just had with Mr. David. And I, for one, I was just jumping in my face right here. But I was going to ask a question as regards um, the reception of blockchain in the Caribbean. By the way, I'm in Nigeria. And for us over here in Nigeria, one of the biggest things that we do to get in touch with people, because I know that millennials and the generations before millennials find it very difficult to accept new information. They stick onto the old things that they know, and they find that to be very convenient and comfortable. But I was going to ask, have you tried using the Gen Z generation to propagate the gospel of blockchain? Because for the Gen Z, they're quick to moving on with new information and new trend. And also, have you tried using influencers, um, micro influencers, macro influencers, and celebrities alike that has like a wide range of influence to also propagate the gospel of blockchain? Yeah.
Yes. So we have done a combination of that. You see, the first thing that I mentioned is because there's a taboo tied to the crypto and anything that has to do with cryptocurrency, we have had to hide a lot of the technology behind what is going on, right? In terms of influencers, of course, with TikTok, a lot of people are able to access information in ways that they haven't been able before. And we have seen the shift. But I will also take a step back and say that, to be honest with you, most of the propagation of the benefits of blockchain and how it can be useful and what it can be used for is pretty much echoed with the millennial generation. So that's where most of our traction is happening, not more so Gen Zs. Now, with Gen Zs, of course, they have more access to information than we ever did before. So these people are born knowing stuff that I wish I knew, right? So I think they're having those conversations with their friends in circles, but the biggest piece is really getting it on those social media platforms that has a large following, educating people. But we want to understand something interesting, right? We're targeting the unbanked, and a lot of the unbanked people, they already don't have the technology. So some of these folks don't even know what TikTok is. They don't even have a phone, right? So one of the steps that we're taking is the financial information or the data on the back end that we are collecting. We're working with users to tell them, hey, your information may potentially be shared with financial institutions so they can understand what are some of the gaps that they're seeing and how best they can tailor financial assets and resources to target the unbanked. And that's by going into those communities, having conversations about these people, sensitizing them in persons about the blockchain and the future and Web3 and what it holds for mankind, right? Those persons we cannot use influencers for. We need people to be boots on the ground, do grassroots efforts, have conversation in local communities so that we can get the unbanked on the banking system. Once we get them in the banking system and they're able to benefit from everything that we're doing and they're seeing the benefit, I think that's where you develop trust.
Fantastic. Are you happy with that, Isaac?
Yes, I'm very much cool. Thank you so much, Mr. Tanner.
You're
Great.
very welcome, my friend.
Good. So we have time for two more questions before we move to the next presenter, speaker. Any takers? Anyone else? All right. It looks as though you've cleared up everybody's doubts about cryptocurrency and all of that stuff. They seem very well informed. So no one has any other questions.
Amazing.
Well, I
Thank you,
did.
guys.
It looks like Segun, you have a question before we bring you in?
Oh, not at all, not at all. I
All right,
enjoyed the talk.
fantastic. All right, then, look, Tanner, I thank you so much for a very insightful presentation and the professionalism with which you answered the questions. You know, we look forward to maybe at the end of this session having another short period with you. So now we will introduce our next speaker, who is Oluwasegun Owolabi, and he's a Nigerian cybersecurity engineer at Moniepoint. He shares vital insights on infrastructure security and risk reduction to help founders, developers, and SMEs navigate today's evolving digital threat landscape. Welcome, Segun, and over to you. So tell us.
Sorry, I didn't hear the last part.
I said over to you. The floor is yours.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know if you asked any question because I lost you a little bit there.
All right. So first of all, so what inspired you to get into this space? Why do you think it's so important that cybersecurity be something people consider?
Yeah, cybersecurity is really important, especially when it comes to protection of data and anything that is important to us, needs to be secure. We are just bringing this on an IT level, so that's why we have the term cybersecurity. And looking at the ecosystem we have now, everything is digitized. And since everything is everything is digitized, then we need to know how to secure the important aspect of whatever is digitized. And we talk about data protection, we talk about securing of funds and the likes. So we need to now look at, okay, how do we secure this so that they don't get into the wrong hands? And we ensure that all the things that need to keep this data secure are adhered to. And so it's really, really important that we make sure that our information, our data, our funds are secure in this digital space. So, yeah.
So what do you think are the most common vulnerabilities that you see in FinTech, particularly?
All right. So with my experience, I've seen quite a lot, but I'll just try to break them down into like three, or let's just say two. So there is the human aspect, that's the human, should I call it human vulnerability? And then there's the IT related vulnerability. So in FinTech generally, or IT generally, there's something we normally say that humans are the weakest link. So it means that no matter how strong your infrastructure is, the humans behind them are often seen as the weakest link because any mistake or any ignorance on the human level can render all your tools useless. Yes, so if you have a tool, you bought a tool to secure your environment, and it is not well configured, it is not well optimized to do what it's supposed to do, then it's as bad as having nothing in the first place. So, and in the cybersecurity space, there's been always a threat, to any organization like fintechs now. And what malicious actors normally do most of the time, they employ social engineering, trying to send phishing emails or phishing methods to try and extract information from people working in this fintech so that they can be able to have access to whatever is at the back end, and in this case, customer funds basically. So they try and manipulate using different methods to ensure that to try and get staffs to give away, let's say, their credentials, for example. So that's why. So in a case where, for example, in fintech now, when you have your firewall in place, you have your WAF in place, different tools to ensure that everything is secure, and then a worker, carelessly give out their username and password. So that basically means that an attacker can just log in and do whatever they want to do. It totally skipping all the security apparatus that you have in place. So that is one of the major security vulnerabilities, the human aspect. Then coming to the technology aspect in itself, you also have, we're talking about products right now, because we have different companies that spring up nowadays, building products for customers to serve the customer. And there is this hurry to always produce and just, to serve the customers at the end of the day, but without paying much attention to security, just because they need to meet a need, they need to meet the demand, and they feel that sometimes security is like holding them back in a way. So they just want to spin something out and just get it out there. And in the process, they leave some security gaps that malicious actors, threat actors now come and infiltrate the company, and then they wreak havoc basically. So on the technological aspects, what you normally see is that companies don't really pay attention to that, hereby leaving space for attackers. And one specific one I want to make mention is APIs. APIs is one important module when it comes to transactions here and there. Most times it's not always secure. You see some companies, they build a tool or a solution to serve a customer, and the API keys are out there in the public or are hard-coded into the code. And what this happens is that if an attacker just picks up maybe that particular solution and then reverse engineer it and get the API code, the API keys, then they can use that to launch several attacks, which can damage the reputation of that company and cause them to lose money. So these are the two most the most fundamental areas to look at when it comes to common attacks. Yeah.
Very, very, very interesting. And I imagine that what you're suggesting in terms of the vulnerabilities are not unique to Nigeria. They're universal.
Yes.
So that brings me to another question. Because I know, and you would know too, you're of a younger generation that springing up in Nigeria. You would know that Nigeria in particular has a sort of a dubious record in terms of the players within the fintech space and other technology spaces to be able to hack into machines, to be able to get people from faraway lands to hand over money and all of that stuff. I mean, you guys have a reputation for being, well, when I was
In the
growing up,
news.
it was quite popular that you can't trust Nigerians. They'd hack anything, and at one point Nigerians were even proud of that description. Yeah, but I think now, from what I understand, from what I've read, you're cleaning up your act, so to speak. So less of that stuff is being attributed to Nigerians, because you've got competitors now in China, and in Russia, doing their thing in that space. So how do you think the reputation of Nigeria in that regard would cause people to feel if a Nigerian expert in cybersecurity consults with a Caribbean company? How do you think that would impact the negotiations in that sense?
Yeah, with the whole reputation about Nigerians being always in the often in the news, especially when it comes to dubious means and all. Yes, yes. Even though that is true, however, there are a lot of work going on, and this has gone on in terms of even the enforcement agencies, intercontinental, interregion, trying to make sure that they do a lot of work in that regard. But when it comes to your question, I think even though, yes, there's that problem, but also there is a lot of assurances from the Nigerian ecosystem in terms of the kind of people that we are building now in the cyber security space, because we are also building a kind of cyber conscious environment where people are able to know how, number one, how to identify either scammers or how to identify unsafe practices and how to protect yourself from it. Now, coming to the business part, where maybe if someone from Nigeria is trying to do a business with someone in the Caribbean and all, of course, anyone that wants to do business with anybody, of course, we kind of do like a background check basically to know the antecedents of that person, where they are coming from and the likes. And when you do that, you're able to see, okay, this person is safe to do business with them, especially if they are coming from a well-grounded environment or company, or they have built products that are secure. So you will do your background checks to be able to ensure that who you want to do like a KYC on the person to ensure that who you are doing that business with is not someone that is dubious or someone that just wants to come and cause you trouble, basically. So yes, so that's the second answer to the question. And if
Okay, good,
that's
good. Well said, well said. I'm just curious about how small fintech companies can protect themselves. You know, these companies have very limited resources. And you're saying that, you know, even if you spend a lot of money to buy a firewall, or what do they call these things again? You know, the uh my mind's going a bit
you
blank
have,
here now, but you know, you buy these software that helps you prepare for, you know, unsuspecting threats. So how do small companies prepare themselves for that?
yeah. So as a small company starting up, yes, the number one problem is always a budget constraint. And because you're starting out as a company, number one on your mind is you want to make money. You want to make money definitely, and also support the customers. And uh, you also now have to see how you can bring in security to that. But in my experience, what I've seen so far is that security is always an afterthought. Many companies always wait till when the business has grown, and then and they just say, okay, let's leave that for now. We will treat that one later when the product is out and all. And but that should not be the case. As a small company that is starting up, there are still some safe practices you can look into without even breaking the bank. Yes. So, and the first thing you can do is, number one, the people that you hire from a DevOps perspective now. Now we even have what we call DevSecOps. These are people who build the applications. So now we have a niche called DevSecOps, that's the security aspect. So when you are employing, you want to see that you're employing, number one, you can employ people who already have a history of building, who are in that line of DevOps security, basically. You want to bring them in, number one. Then number two, you also need to train the ones you have. You make sure you train them to build secure code. Because what happens is that if at the beginning of building a product, you're already putting security in place, it means that by the time that product goes live, you even spend much time doing a lot of testing or even find a lot of vulnerabilities on that product, because your developers already built with security in mind. You get. So I've not even talked about even buying solutions to run tests on those products. We are even talking about the bare minimum right now. You get. You have to, train your people to make sure that, okay, when they are building solutions, they already build with security in mind, and by the time the solution goes out there, even when there's an attack, when there's a potential threat, what the malicious actors will see will not be something that would be impactful like that. It may just be something little that will not really impact the company. So that's part of the things, that they can do to make sure that they stay afloat. And then we also have what we call open source tools that they can use in the time being, things that are free tools basically, that they can use to protect themselves. So while you are still small, you can use those tools so that maybe by the time you have some progress and you have made some money, you can now go for the premium tools of those solutions, which has more features. But at the beginning level, you can start with those open source tools to build, to protect yourself a little bit, so that at least you are protected in some way and not just left exposed, from the beginning. So these are the ways, little companies can, they can do to, be a little bit secure before they make it big.
Interesting. And that brings me to another point. When you go to places like Curry's or these places that specialize in selling equipment, they would attempt to sell you antivirus packages. And then, of course, there are loads of them being sold online. How does one in the market for an antivirus product know which one to select? Because they all are saying, yeah, we're the best in the business. We protect you for this, that, and the other. Pay this extra and then you get the best. How is one to know which product is really giving you what it says on the tin?
Oh, very good question. Yeah, so over my years of experience, and this is like an industry thing, so when you want to buy any solution, whether antivirus or any security solution, number one, you do your research. So there's something we call the Gartner. So it's like a website where you check the comparison or the grading of different solutions, and you see the ones maybe that are the top ones. And then there are also some comments to check, okay, this is the pros of this solution and these are the cons of this solution. So, and you are looking at people that have actually, number one, they've gone ahead of you to buy these solutions, they've used them, and they're now giving their feedback on these solutions. So this Gartner is a good place to go to check the rating of this solution. And another thing that makes up that Gartner is that we also have people we call like security testers, people who actually test solutions around to check for how strong they are. You get. So this makes up what is on that Gartner, the Gartner board, to now see, okay, these are the, let's say, top 3, and no, then you now make your decision based on that. And although at the end of the day, you still have to look at the budget you have, because the better the solution, the more expensive it actually is. So you can now leverage and have an internal conversation that, okay, can we purchase this? Do we have the budget for it? But just on the face value, you need to do a comparison and before you make that decision. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. I totally agree. Because I'm in that space and I get confused, these salespeople telling, even I'm a salesman myself, but sometimes you don't like people pressing you to make a purchase if you don't have all the information, So I'm going to ask you one last question before we go to the floor. So how can African and Caribbean regions build talent pipelines that can deal with the growth of cybersecurity?
Sorry, come again.
All right. So we have, like, for example, ACSIS. So our responsibility is to bring entrepreneurs from Africa and the Caribbean together, right? To work sustainably to reduce waste. So I'm suggesting here that is there a mechanism where Africans and Caribbeans can collaboratively build pipelines, talent pipelines that can deal with the growth of cybersecurity?
Okay. Yeah, of course. In fact, I think this is already something that is even ongoing already, because there are already different, should I call them tech ops, that are springing up now to ensure that pipeline. So what we now see these days, that we see different tech ops who organize boot camps and train people over a course of some months, and to ensure that they have these skills. And apart from that, they don't just stop at that. They also try and make sure that you are ready to be employed by companies that actually need the services. Yeah. So, but more needs to be done on that in that aspect. But at the beginning level, this is something we see that is happening. And another thing is that currently it seems that more focus is on the curriculum of cybersecurity is more on the postgraduate level. So if this can be brought down to, let's say, the grassroots level, like university level, even up to secondary school, primary school level, so that people already, just at the way we have mathematics, English, okay, we already have computer, you can bring it down to the level so that we can even have people growing into that field, and it's not up to when you finish university before you even know there's something called cybersecurity. You get. So that is one way that one aspect that we can go through. I've also mentioned boot camp. So those boot camps also help into trying to take students through a process, and then they write exams, global recognizable exams. Like we have Computer Security Plus, for example. We have CISSP, even though that is advanced, but we have entry level exams that can be written, and you can use even present this during interview stage that, oh, I have this certification. So these are ways that we can go through. But the level that will really make an impact is to bring it down. It should not be just at the postgraduate level. It should be brought down to even the university, primary, secondary level, so that people can have this they can have access to this education even at a very little stage. So these are just a few points I will mention.
Fantastic. You've done a great job, Segun. You quite good at articulating the area of cybersecurity. So what I'll do now is I'll open the floor for questions, and then we will start heading towards wrapping up this session. So the floor is open. Anyone who has any questions for Segun? Let's see. Seems like everybody's also very clear on what cybersecurity is about and the vulnerabilities and what they need to do to protect themselves, which is quite good. No questions?
I do have a question for Segun. Segun Tana here. So with cybersecurity, of course, like I mentioned before, I think there is a gap in the talent pool. Like, for example, in the Caribbean right now, one of the things that I was thinking about is to actually create something like an incubator, right? That would have young people leaving college and they're going through this. If I want to become cyber certified, I join this boot camp. And then what we would do, the government would look at, okay, we have 10 cybersecurity professionals in Dominica. Let's see if we can use those individuals to market a product. So we go to Jamaica, we say we have 10 people from Dominica, we can build a cybersecurity infrastructure for you. So basically you are generating revenue using your people to work with different countries, almost like a consultant business. Have you seen any of that type of model in Africa? And if yes, how are they making it like how are they monetizing it as opposed to just having cybersecurity professionals work for one company or business?
Yeah, I think you raise a very, very important point, and an area that is yet untapped, because even the talent pool or the pipeline that we see these days that is the most popular is to get potential cybersecurity people who are interested in cybersecurity ready to work for established companies and all. But we rarely see what you just mentioned, which is not just to work, but to actually come and build something from the scratch. You get. So yeah, that's very important. And I've not really seen that kind of what you mentioned. The closest thing I've seen so far is what happens is, you know, people serve as middlemen
Mhm.
to companies. You know, after the OEMs, you have the vendors, more like consultancy. So they are the ones who take from the OEM, study the solution that they are selling, and then resell it to the other, established companies and all. But to build from the scratch, let's say maybe to build a product, we've not really, really seen, we've not really, really seen that in Africa, as far as I know yet. And to do that is going to actually take it's going to take financial backing, either from government or from investors, yeah, to actually pull that off, either private or public investor to actually pull that off. And again, you also have to look at, okay, what is going to be the niche? What is going to be, what are they going to be doing extra from what is on ground already? You get it?
Mhm.
Now we talk of innovation. Yes. So, and of course, government also has to have a play in this.
Okay, excellent. Moderator, I have one more question, a follow-up to that one. So, AI has changed the landscape in a lot of ways, right? But we also see bad actors using AI to penetrate and to really, ransomware has definitely been on an increase. There are a lot of countries that have been held ransom by cybersecurity and hackers and stuff. Now, in your experience though, in Africa, how are you guys using AI to combat that from a cybersecurity standpoint?
All right. So, generally speaking, um, using of AI, it's a gradual process. Yes, because most of the time you see that, generally speaking, we see that cybersecurity most time is always, should I say, reactive. You have to react. Something happens, then you have to now react. Yeah. So, but gradually we are already seeing even the different security solutions we are using also have also reacted by also bringing in AI into their analysis of threats. So, because what normally happens most times is that what bad actors normally do is to try and use AI to look to manipulate the traditional way of hacking. They try and use AI to make sure that the traditional tools are finding difficult to detect uh, uh, their their infiltration, basically. So the security world has now also gone and also modified their security solutions to be able to detect this modification. Take for example now, anytime there is a threat actor is trying to infiltrate, maybe through a web application, basically through a malicious traffic, and there's a kind of signature that a traditional tool is expecting to see to know that this is a malicious actor. But the AI method being used by these attackers is able to bypass that. But now the security solutions we see now is able to grab that using behavioral analysis to be able to detect those kind of attacks. Yeah, and also even from an internal perspective, because there are two sides of this. Aside from using AI, the malicious actor using AI, even from an internal perspective, there's also the use of AI solutions to also do our day-to-day tasks, which also in itself has its own risk in itself. Because take, for example, let's take ChatGPT, for example. If you are putting a prompt on ChatGPT, ChatGPT most likely may also use those your prompts to train itself. And those kind of information can be out there if you put in sensitive information, you get. So there's now this awareness that, okay, how do we protect ourselves? Because already we also don't want to hinder, we don't want to hinder the use. However, we also need to be careful about the use so that while trying to use AI to do your job, you don't also put in sensitive information out there. From our perspective, from our history now, sometimes you see when someone is trying to ask a question from ChatGPT or Gemini, for example, and they put the internal IP addresses or even source codes that are owned by a company, and then they throw it there. You get. So how do you combat that? So now you now need to look at strong DLP solutions. These are solutions that look through the traffic that is going out. Can you see hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Traffic that are going out, of the company, and analyzing them, seeing does it contain anything sensitive. If it contains any sensitive, it blocks it, or it does not allow it. For you to even upload them, it does not allow it. So these are the things that we have seen, that security is also coming up to make sure that we react adequately to these AI threats.
Awesome.
Amazing.
Thank you.
All right. Good. Well, look, I've got one more question for you, Segun, and then we'll go back to the floor, because it seems like this thing is really interesting. So I'm curious to know what is the biggest misconception that people have about digital finance or cybersecurity on both sides of the market, both Africa and the Caribbean? This is for either of you or both of you to respond to.
All right, hold on for me. Okay, repeat that one more time, sorry.
Yeah, saying, in your view, what do you think is the greatest misconception from the African Caribbean community about the value of cybersecurity and fintech?
Well, I think for the fintech piece, let me see if I can touch on that real quick, is basically what we mentioned before, right? Folks not being educated enough to know the benefits of financial technology and what it entails. In some circles, even when I have conversations and I use the acronym FinTech, they don't even know that it means financial technology, right? So I think what that tells me is there is a lot of gaps and areas and opportunities to educate people on what financial technology really is and what it means. And one of my good friends mentioned that, will we have banks in the future, right? Do we expect banks to be a thing of the future with blockchain and all of those things that we're doing? And I will say this, the name bank will continue to exist, but it will operate in a different capacity. Because on the blockchain, no one controls anything. All right. You are in total control of your data, everything that's coming in and out of the blockchain. So you don't need an intermediary. And right now, a bank is pretty much an intermediary. That's actually something that was developed by the financial banking system, even during the mercantile era in Britain, right? So the emergence of the banking system took root from that time. And right now, it's been entrenched into everything that we know and we see. In Web3 and in the future, the way that it operates right now will be a thing of the past. But at the same time, I think we need to continue to educate people. We need to continue to sensitize people. We need to break some of those barriers and taboos that we have always done things this way. Let us continue to do it that way type of mentality. And we need to actually bring our people out of poverty by sharing knowledge and getting everybody to a place of financial independence. I think if we can show people and walk them through the steps to get there, financial technology, cybersecurity will be more receptive in the diaspora community or even those in the Caribbean. Some of these people have never traveled. They have never gone outside of their country. They don't know what another way of life look like, right? So that information that we pass on to them, it's what they're going to use to make certain decisions and life choices. That's why it is important that we understand those limitations and the things that they have affecting them from getting that information the way that we do, and being able to synthesize that information and put it into practical use.
Well said. Well said. Thank you. Thank you for that. We have a question coming in from Jackie Clark. Jackie, go ahead.
Sorry, no, I don't have a question. I just sent a sign to say I agree.
Ah, okay, fantastic. So Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for the contribution, Jackie. Great. I think we've lost Segun, probably has connectivity challenges. So that brings us to the wrap-up stage. I don't know if anyone else has a question that they want to ask before we wrap this session up today.
Well, this is not really a question, but I think it's more of a comment. I just want to say, and I'm happy this is being recorded, so for the folks that were not able to join, they can actually review the recording. I think regional integration is one thing, but integration between the Caribbean and Africa is the future. I think in the past, there have been the misconception that when you look at mainstream media, they always show you the poor parts of Africa, right? And in our mind, we're indoctrinated to think that Africa is not a nation of wealth. Well, most of the wealth that is in the world started from Africa, okay? And as a history major student, the transatlantic trade is what built everything we have in this world. So by virtue of that, we can say that Africans has always been the pillar and the development of society over time. So I think now we need to go back to our roots, dig deep, collaborate with our fellow brothers across the Atlantic and really utilize the resources that they have instead of allowing those companies to come in or nations to come in to take those resources. I mean, right now, cobalt and all of those things that are being used to make all the chips and all the smartphones, Africa is resource rich when it comes to that, right? So I think the governments really need to have conversations about a united Africa, a united currency for Africa, like we have the United States dollar. Once we get to those stage, that's where I believe the world will really start to take the Caribbean and Africa serious, that we're really the engine that runs this entire planet. So guys, just something to kind of keep in mind when you're having conversation with persons within your communities or your little groups, that you really push the importance of integration and collaboration between Africa and the Caribbean.
Yeah, very good point. Excellent point, actually, because ACSIS, this organization that set this webinar up, we were actually in Grenada last week at what's known as the Active 2025, which is the African Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum, sponsored by Frexim Bank, which is the largest development bank in Africa. And the central focus of that conference last year was the opportunities that exist for Africa and the Caribbean to come together. And I think a lot of it stems from how would I put this? The negative policies of the Trump administration. What he has done in effect is to cause Africa and Africans to think inwardly. We are now looking at our own talents. We're now looking at our own resources and thinking, well, look, he has decided unilaterally to disband US aid, which has put many countries and many communities in peril. So we can't sit there with our arms up saying, well, look, we give up. We can't do that. We need to look at, because we have scientists, we have sports people, we have academics, we have everything that runs this world, we've got within our community. So what they are saying is that we need to now pay a lot more attention to what skills, talents, and attributes we have as a people to drive the planet. We need to have better contracts with the West for these rare resources like rare earth and all of this stuff. We need to encourage our citizens who are living in the West to return home to contribute. So it was a rather productive and progressive discussion over 2 days in Grenada. So exactly what you're saying, Tana, is what's being promoted at government level at both Caribbean and Africa. So I think we're on the way.
Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you.
I think we're on the way. So Segun is back. I don't know if he wants to speak to that question that I had asked earlier. Let me see if he's still here.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes, you're still here. So yeah, I was asking about the misconceptions that you might have experienced within the Nigerian or African community about cybersecurity and fintech. What do you think are the major misconceptions?
Yeah, so first of all, regarding cybersecurity, number one is cybersecurity is always seen as number one is always seen as a money sucking venture. Talking from an organizational perspective now, because a lot of times you always go to management to ask for money to buy solutions, and then they see that as, oh, with the money we made in the last quarter, you want to take out of it to go and buy solutions. So that again is a flaw in the way some management see security. Instead of seeing it as a business enabler, they don't see it like that. So that's why sometimes it's always seen as an afterthought. And at the end of the day, it is until when something bad happens, then the money that is not there suddenly becomes available, which should not be so. If you are paid careful attention at the beginning of when you are starting the company and you have put things in place, and you at the helm of affairs, at the board level, even at the C-suite level, you already have the mindset that, oh, whatever product you are putting out has to be secure. Then I'm very sure more than half of the attacks we have today, the successful attacks we have today, will not be successful. But because that is not the case, they wait until something happens and then they become serious. So the misconception is that cybersecurity is a money sucking, venture, rather than seen as a business enabler. Because what happens when you put you give care to cybersecurity in your environment, it basically means that your customers have more trust in whatever you are dishing out to them. They know that, oh, this company takes security, very important. So we are sure that when we put our money there, it's going to be secure. So that's one misconception, that cybersecurity always sucks our money and is not, yeah. Then the second one, I must say, is especially for fintech. I think when fintech became a thing, it's always seen as an insecure. It had this level that these people are not like the traditional banks. People are used to these traditional banks where you go into the bank, you go and request for your money, and then it will take a lot of process before you get it. So now you can't have something that it is fast before you know it, to get your money, and from one app to the other, your money is out and all. And people are saying that, wait a minute, is this thing really secure? Are we sure that? And then down the line, you see that a fintech gets attacked, and then some monies were lost, and say, oh yeah, we said it. This thing is not secure. It's too good to be true. How can I just put my some press on things, and then the money has appeared at the other side? And so you see there is that. But as time goes on, of course, with regulatory bodies, especially with the CBN, that's the apex banks, trying to clamp down and make sure that even if you have a fintech license, you have to adhere with some policies to make sure that customer data and funds are well secure. So those are the two very big misconceptions when it comes to cybersecurity. I want to add a third point from an outside perspective, that these are people who want to cybersecurity as a career. There's all this misconception that, oh, cybersecurity, you have to learn how to code. You need to learn how to code before you get into the field. And many people that I've mentored, that's the first thing that they come and I say, no. Even I that I'm speaking to you, I'm not really good at coding. And of course, I normally also tell them that cybersecurity is like a household name, just like medicine, where medicine is a household name there, but you have the different aspects that you can specialize in. So it is in cybersecurity. In fact, we have a non-technical part of cybersecurity, which is the GRC, governance, risk, and compliance. If you don't want to be dealing with solutions and all, GRC is for you. If you don't want to deal, yeah. So even within the technical part of cybersecurity, it's not everything that you have to know how to code. So we have to disabuse people's mind about that before they now calm down and say, okay, it's something they want to do. Then they now we present the different, if you want to go into GRC, it's there for you. If you want to be a SOC analyst, it's there for you. If you want to be a pen tester or a red teamer, it's there for you. So we present the different options and they look at the ones that they feel, calls to them that they can cope with, and then they run with it. So those are I will just stop there.
Excellent. Excellent. Every day you learn something, and you're quite right. Cybersecurity is like an entity itself with subdivisions, opportunities that exist below. So fantastic. One last question, and this goes to the two of you.
Okay.
What bold idea do each of you have that can truly transform the cybersecurity and fintech space over the next 5 years?
Segun, go ahead.
I wanted to point to you. Yeah, so this question, the way I want to treat it is, I want to treat it as should I say, a continuation of what is already on ground. Because from the way I see things, right, I'll rather let us be grounded in what we have rather than taking a leap. Yeah, we can always innovate, that is there, but we still have a lot of ground to cover, especially when it comes to the unbanked. You get, there's still a lot to be covered around the underbanked and the unbanked. And one area I think will be a very good innovation, if maybe it's already out there, so that I don't know, is to see if the possibility of bringing banking, even to the US, what do you call it now, without internet. Let me put it that way. Without the internet, and what I mean by that is that what you have now, especially in Nigeria, is before you do a transaction on your phone, of course, there has to be internet connection, whether on your phone or through the POS machine. And anytime that is not there, you cannot do anything. You get. Now, not to talk of when you now go to rural areas where they don't even use smartphones. You get. So that becomes difficult to do transaction and all. So if it can be done where there is more coverage in terms of the USSD, which we already have in Nigeria, but in a way such that I'm envisaging a kind of system where the POS machine that uses internet, if it can also transact using a USSD without, even though it does not have an internet connection, so that someone in the village, in a rural area who doesn't have a smartphone or internet can still kind of do some level of transaction. And that way, you've already captured them in that way. And whenever, there's a sync, basically, where when internet comes back or you get to internet, that is synced to the ecosystem of the finance. So that way, you've already brought them in. And you can even use their data to be able to analyze their behavior, to get loans and some other stuff like that. So you see that in that way, even though that environment does not have internet like that or smartphones, you've managed to bring them into that ecosystem using just their SIM cards. They have a phone number, they have a SIM card. Just that should be enough to be able to do transaction at the very grassroots level. In that way, you've brought them in. Their data is already, in the system. And again, for example, in Nigeria, anytime you buy a SIM, there's this SIM registration that takes place. They take your photograph, you have your name, that's a national identification number. You have a BVN which ties your identity and your banking, it ties it together. So bringing that into this, using that as a form of identity or like a KYC, even when this unbanked, underbanked, you can use that to bring them in. But we need that technology to make sure that we also have that at that level, where even if there's no internet, they can still do transaction. Yeah. So
Fantastic.
That's just,
Fantastic. Well said. Well said. Tano, you got 1.5 minutes to tell me
All
what
right.
you think.
Yeah, so for me, it would be like I mentioned before, a pan-Caribbean and a pan-African stablecoin, right? And I think for it to work, it would be backed by the coalition of the governments, the central banks, fintech innovators like myself. I believe that would transform the game, right? So guys, just imagine a currency that's instantly transferable across any country, right? It is pegged by stability and it's usable in Africa and the Caribbean. What that would do for all of us is one, it would lower the remittance cost. It would boost inter-regional trade, which I mentioned before, and it would give us true financial independence, which is what we're looking for. And those things we don't get from the traditional banking system right now. And I just want to pivot real quick back to what Segun said, because actually we've dropped in our phase 2, we're putting a component just for the unbanked, where it's going to provide a ledger for them with all transfers transactions, even if they are not connected to the internet. Okay. So we're going to cater to these people with that type of technology that you're mentioning, because there's a gap for it. So hopefully we can at some point like work with or collaborate with others in the diaspora on your end to see how that technology can work in Nigeria and the rest of Africa as well. And that's it from me, moderator.
Amazing. Amazing contributions from you both, Segun and Tana. And I hope this is the beginning of a new relationship between the two of you. ACSIS is about connecting people. So you guys, I am going to reach out to you guys in the next couple of months to see that something is taking place between Tana and Segun for the greater benefit of the African Caribbean space. Yeah. So don't think this is the end. This is the beginning. Okay, good. So listeners, today we had Oluwasegun Owolabi, Nigerian Cybersecurity Engineer at Moniepoint, speak about his experience with cybersecurity and the implications of it across Africa and how he sees it improving over time in spite of the people who are in the space hacking and all of that stuff. We also had Tana DeJean, a Dominican who is the CEO of Drop, who spoke eloquently about how it is blockchain can manage the future of cross-border payments in the Caribbean and how there's opportunity for that to spread throughout Africa, leading to collaboration that is effective for our people going forward. So I'd like to thank both of these eloquent and informed speakers for being on the show today. And I've charged them with working together going forward. And I will report to you at the next FinTech episode on what they are doing together as individuals for the African Caribbean space. And what I'd like to do now is to just basically wrap up, thank all the people who contributed in terms of asking questions, making comments, and to give you some announcements. So many of you will be aware that ACSIS is holding its next event, which is the flagship event on the 21st and 22nd of November at Queen's Gatehouse in London. But prior to that, we are pushing, and we're pushing it really hard now, our reparations conference, which is known as the World Reparations Conference on the 25th of September at the House of Lords, no less. And I'd like to let you know that our next webinar in this series will be focusing on health and life sciences part 2, and that will be held on August 21st. So please spread the word. This video will be out on our YouTube channel by tomorrow. And I urge you and I invite you to share this with all those who weren't fortunate enough to join us today so that they can see the quality of the discussion that we've had today and benefit from it going forward. So my name is David Roberts. I'd like to thank you all for your contribution, your patience, and your support. And we look forward to seeing you again on the 21st of August, 2005. Goodbye.
Goodbye.